The beginning is not temporal. It is omnipresent. It enables each person to be themselves, to realize their natural qualities, to accomplish their destiny. So says Elizabeth Rochard de la Vallée in her book, The Symbolism of Numbers in Classical China. It is good sometimes, said the sage, to lose sight of earth and be released from obsession with form. Herbach, the main character in this book, answered like an echo. The man who is free of it could know the netters. And that is from Isha Schwaller de Lubicz's book, Herbach, Egyptian Initiate. If laws of form introduces a unary calculus based on the first distinction, which is essentially a trinity, then how come it is only two that can play the game? Laws of Form and Only Two Can Play the Game, this game, are both books written by Spencer Brown under different names. They're linked by his own admission through the first distinction. But where does one begin to tell the story of the first distinction? The story I tell today begins in Egypt. My mother's family comes from Upper Egypt. I spent my formative days in Alexandria. I grew up among souks and bazaars and among stories. Stories which included ancient Egyptian creation myths. The stories tell of the netters. Although the netters are often referred to as gods and goddesses, it would be more accurate to describe them as aspects of Ptah, the ineffable source of creation. Much later, when I encountered laws of form for the first time, I intuitively felt that the work had much in common with ancient Egyptian creation myths. I've been wanting to explore this link for some time now, and as the nature of the first distinction is worth exploring as a topic, I'm grateful for this opportunity to present my preliminary thoughts on this link. I'm also grateful to the many people who have read through and commented on work in progress drafts of this paper and informed its development. Specifically, I'd like to thank Fred Cummins, Jack Engstrom, Charles Hertzer, Denise Hoke, Rob Keeley, Jerry Sweets, and Adam Tetlow, among others. Let's start with Let us for a moment stop counting. Let us lose sight of numbers and be released from obsession, from form, so that we might be able to know the netters. To witness their birth, we must travel back to where there was no time and when there was no space. Like many of the best stories, this story is symbolic. Although it features characters and events that can be diagrammed linearly and graphically, the events it describes happen instantaneously. Its characters are ineffable. Although it features characters and events that can be the story was told in different forms in Heliopolis, Memphis, Hermopolis, and Thebes, but the essence of the common narrative which unfolds through all of them is the same. To experience this unfolding, which occurs simultaneously outside time, we must become the cosmic ocean. We must experience its depths. This ocean, the Nun, is deep and wide. The deep ocean has no surface, nor does it rest on a foundation. The wide ocean has no shore. None, not one, shall be able to describe it. None, not one, shall be able to give it a name. None. This ocean, being without limit, is powerful beyond limit. Being deep beyond comprehension, it is powerful beyond comprehension. It is undivided, unpolarized unity. In ancient Egypt, creation starts from an abstract beginning in which we find undivided, unpolarized unity. We see the same thing in Spencer Brown's work. After all, where does the first distinction come from? There's a stirring in the Nun, and in that movement, a desire emerges within the Nun. The spirit of Ptah pervades every non-existent part of it. It manifests a desire to know oneself. When the cosmic ocean moves, Is it Ptah who moves it, or is it the ocean that moves Ptah? Ptah, who sounds creation into being by naming and voicing. Ptah, who creates through the act of speech. Ptah, whose own name sounds out creation. Ptah, to create. Ptah, to open. Ptah, to form. Ptah's name reversed becomes Hotep, peace, rest, contentment, and the setting sun. These kinds of symbolic references and mirroring and reversals are very much part of ancient Egyptian thought and ancient Egyptian culture. And just as the desire to know arises in the self arises in the knowing. Thus, the first distinction arises autopoietically in the void. But what is the nature of Ptah's appearance? And how does it relate to Spencer Brown's view of how the first distinction appears? In Only Two Can Play This Game, Spencer Brown, writing as James Keyes, specifically links Rolt's translation of the divine names by Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite to laws of form, noting the parallel accounts of the emergence of time, which unfold in both works. His explanation of the 5 levels of eternity which give rise to time unfolds in an endnote which spans 9 pages. He summarized his thoughts on the 5 levels of eternity at the American University of Masters, or AUM, conference in 1973 in a much more condensed form as being, seeing, being, seeing, being, seeing, being, seeing, being, and if it tries to see that, it finds it can't without going half blind and coming out into time. The references on the left in the diagram in front of you can only exist potentially at this level. They only appear as workable levels outside eternity, within time. The symbolist Egyptologist René Adolphe Schwaller de Lubicz sees Ptah as a symbol of polarized unity associated with the phi principle, the golden section. Imagine this as a potential line. The thing about this phi section is that there are 2 potential positions for a potential phi cut or golden section cut to potentially manifest. Follow me for a moment. Start at one end of the line. Call the dots being, call the curves seeing. We have being, seeing being, seeing being, seeing being, seeing being. And now, do it from both sides simultaneously in 4 directions. And we are still at level 0, being, potentially, never occurring, perpetually recurring in the always, ever, never. In his discussion of the 5 levels of eternity at the AOM conference, Spencer Brown paraphrased Rolt, transcribed mistakenly in print as Roth, on the first time. Spencer Brown's words are, and all this went on in perfect harmony until the time came for time to begin. I've not been able to find those precise words in Rolt's introduction, but the idea is there. It's there as 2 streams. Rolt talks about 2 streams of potentiality, 2 aspects of the creative impulse, not strictly speaking existent. He says that the universal stream of potentiality emanates into emptiness, and the particular stream emanates into nothingness, or rather, through nothingness, back at once into the superessence in a ceaseless revolution which, until the appointed moment arrives for time and the temporal world to begin, leaves no trace outside its superessential source and dwelling and goal. This is the passage that I think Spencer Brown was paraphrasing when he said, and all this went on in perfect harmony until the time came for time to begin. Those rivers for me link symbolically to the ancient Egyptian netters known as the Ogdoad. To evoke their presence, weave 2 pairs of fingers over, you can do this right now, over and under each other. How many fingers? How many crossings? 4 crossings, I make it, 4 intersections, 2 strands for each, 8 entities, 1 form. We find the 4 primordial pairs of netters, which form the Ogdoad, depicted in various ways. As circles in the void, shown here. As anthropomorphic figures within circles. And as anthropomorphic frog-headed or snake-headed netters or figures. It's important not to take the symbols literally. Rather, it's important to go beyond the symbols to the things they symbolize. The 8 are also known as the Hehu, or infinites. They symbolize the abyss, unlimitedness, darkness, hiddenness. When Amun later rose to prominence as a divinity of national significance, Tenem and Tenemet appeared as substitutes. Tenem comes from a root meaning to go astray or become lost. It's sometimes translated as gloom, but it's perhaps better understood as the nowhere. Other substitutions evoke night, sensation, and emptiness. But these ideas are not only found in ancient Egypt. The unfolding of the 5 levels of eternity can be traced through the unfolding of chapter 7 of the Huainanzi from China in the 2nd century BCE. It expresses very similar states, as you can see. One mustn't forget that Spencer Brown drew the epigraph to the main body of Laws of Form from the first verse of the Tao Te Ching, or first chapter of the Tao Te Ching, specifically referencing the nameless as the origin of heaven and earth. I have analyzed the Chinese text in my book, Story and Structure, and I've explored the link between the Chinese circular structure, which is based on this arrangement of the 5 elements, in my presentation for Rethinking the Float Tank that Brandy organized in 23. You'll find details of both online. Just search for @Leon Conrad Story. I would also like at this point to draw your attention to the parallel between Laws of Form and Genesis that Joseph Freistetter has published, and his presentation at LoF24 on this. It's important to remember that all of this unfolds ineffably before the first time comes into existence. The unfolding needs to be understood and expressed sequentially and simultaneously and instantaneously. It's a silent double clap, which is essentially one. It both exists and forever never does. Both Spencer Brown and Rolt acknowledge 5 levels of eternity. These qualities underpin the unfolding of creation, but they are, in essence, ineffable. You might have noticed that there are 5 levels between nothingness and the superessence, but Rolt sees the outer 2 as identical. They can thus be linked to each other and to Spencer Brown's void, or the 6th level at which being comes out half-blind. But at this point, we're still not at the first time. The ancient Egyptians referred to the first time as Septepi. This differs qualitatively from the primordial state of being, which they refer to as Paweti. We're not yet at Septepi, we're at Paweti. This is where the Ogdoad hang out. Snakes and frogs are deeply embedded in our subconscious. We feel their primality and often shy away from it and them. Snakes bite, frogs jump. In the next stage of the ancient Egyptian account of how creation comes into being, the Ogdoad, arising from the spirit of Ptah, provides the energy that gives rise to the desire that results in Atum's physical manifestation. Atum, like everything else, is an aspect of Ptah. As Spencer Brown notes, there can be no appearance that is not an awareness of appearance, and of course, no awareness that is not an appearance of awareness. Atum, the netter whose name means both all and nothing, brings himself into being out of deep sleep. We still haven't reached the first time. Atum appears in the form of a cosmic mound. The name for this in ancient Egyptian is Ben, and it relates to the objects you see on screen. The rising is creatively energetic. The verb weben means to rise and is used in relation to the sun. Ben is a verb that means to erect, to raise. The mound is a symbol of cosmic energy, the energy of Atum. In Celtic languages, the term persists in the same sense today, as in the case of Ben Nevis. Atom contains the fire and earth, the essence of the neter ta. We can see atom as the first trinity, divine, original, indivisible, and incomprehensible in its oneness. One might be tempted to see the cosmic ocean as feminine and receptive, atom as masculine and fecundating. They're aspects of unity, the polarized unity that is, in essence, one and the same. The cosmic ocean is not exclusively feminine, the cosmic mound is not exclusively masculine. For René Adolphe Schwaller de Lubicz, atom is father-mother, a male placenta, likened to the male seahorse which incubates the female's eggs. The energetic process is generative and regenerative. Hence, the Bennu bird is the phoenix, and Benben is the sacred mound, the obelix, the sacred stone. Benbent is the pyramidion, at top of the pyramid or the top of the obelisk, or the reference to the complete obelix. In a related sense, Benef is the liquid excreted by the kidneys. Kidneys in both China and Aboriginal Australia represent the seat of individuation. In China, this is seen as Jing energy, as in the Tao Te Ching. Jing energy generates qi, which is linked to individuation. In Aboriginal culture, Pirlirpa, the spirit, the soul, the person's essence, is believed to reside in the kidneys. This is perhaps why Lucie Lamy, the Isha and René's daughter, describes Atum as having created himself by causing the seed from the kidneys to come. Although I found no direct textual evidence for this reading, the association is there in the language. It's omnipresent. You realize it when you least expect it. Excuse me. That was involuntary. But it reminds me of how Shu and Tefnut came into being. Back in ancient Egypt, Atum sneezed, Atum spat. It's said that when he sneezed, he brought Tefnut, the netter of fire, into being. When he spat, Shu, the netter of air, came into being. You would have thought it would be the other way round. Shu being sneezed out and Tefnut being spat out, but no. While some translations give expectorate rather than the sneeze, and some follow the obvious onomatopoeia, others, whose interpretative vision I share, reflect the terms. They switch them around, giving more importance to the involuntary and voluntary intentions behind the actions and the onomatopoeic actions. I believe the switching of name and action to be deliberate. Ultimately, though, Shu and Tefnut contain each other and are reflected in each other like yin and yang energies. And both interpretations could well be found to exist side by side. Shu and Tefnut, inseparable, mutually dependent, unifiers of heaven and earth, give rise to two netters that complete the Aeneid of 9 divine aspects of the ineffable Ptah, the 9 netters which surround Atum. Both Shu and Tefnut participate in Atum and in the Aeneid. If Shu and Tefnut symbolize union, in mythic terms, shown through the symbolic union of heaven and earth, then Geb and Nut symbolize separation, shown through the separation of heaven and earth. Isis and Osiris, Seth and Nephthys symbolize different aspects of the forces of expansion, contraction, attraction, and repulsion. They do this individually, in pairs, and collectively. The Aeneid is said to have arisen from the seed and hand of Atum, and when fully realized becomes the teeth and lips of Ptah. Here, in the domain of the first distinction within the 5 levels of eternity, we meet face to face with the paradox of our own being. The 4 manifest couples and Atum complete the Aeneid, 9 netters which surround ineffable unity. And now we've almost reached the first time, which we have always been in, as we participate in the 5 levels of eternity from which it and we, according to these varied accounts, emanate, and to which we wish to return. One way of understanding this mystery is through the Tetractys. I used to go 1, 2, 3, 4, add them up, they make 10. Engaging with ancient Egyptian creation myths taught me to look at the Tetractys differently. Start at 0 as the first level, being, gives rise to the potential for duality. 2, the numbers 1 and 2 become the second level, seeing being, which gives rise to the potential for trinity. The 3 numbers 3, 4, 5 become the third level, seeing being. The potential for quadruplicity arises. 4 numbers 6, 7, 8, 9 become the fourth level, seeing being. Then the return to 0 as 10, seeing being, and coming out half blind. The ancient Egyptian account, the Chinese account, as laid out in the Jingsheng, Pseudo-Dionysius' account, and Spencer Brown's account of the coming into being, of being as the first distinction, giving rise to Septepi the first time, all tell the same story. The unfolding is simultaneous with the unary revelation of unity as it manifests through the 5 levels of eternity. To finish off, I would like to share another story from ancient Egypt with you. There's a creation story in the Bremner Rind Papyrus in the British Museum, which tells the story of creation from the point of view of the Neter Cheper, the scarab beetle, whose name is a logos, which combines aspects of both noun and verb, Cheper, to create creation. The hieratic characters have been transcribed into hieroglyphs. As with every text, transcriptions are not definitive and translations vary. However, the play of word and idea is evident. In Lucy Lamy's translation, shown to the right here, the text reads, "Thus spoke the Lord of all. Cheperi, cheper, chepero, cheper kui, im chepero, in chepri, cheper, semtepi." Later, Cheper reflects on his own coming into being with the universe. "I did all that I desired in this non-existent world. I dilated myself in it. I contracted my own hand all alone before there was any birth. My own mouth came to me, and magic was my name." Here we have desire expressed with the word mur for love, symbolizing affinity or attraction. We have expansion followed by contraction. My own mouth came to me, and magic was my name. Ultimately, as Spencer Brown realized, but sometimes understandably found it hard to articulate, the first distinction comes into being out of love. That, as he well knew, is real magic. And that is really all that counts.
Thank you, Leon. We can open it for questions now.
Leon, this really that's really interesting that the 5 levels and the pentagon being the first regular figure that can become concave. And I think there's probably a connection there.
Another interesting thing I wonder about, and perhaps I've mentioned this before, right? The reference to like Plotinus and Aristotle on time and eternity, where the words themselves, and there's very little literature on this that I've found. The word for now, which is the central concern in the matters of time in Aristotle in the physics, is nun, N-U-N, nu, upsilon, nu. And the relation of that to the whole, or the sphere of the all in the Platinian sort of context, is the whole, the olos, right? The O-L-O, right? And the shapes are a real magic formula, you know? So, I mean...
yeah, you have the Nu and the Nun in ancient Egypt. The Nun is the cosmic ocean, the Nu is the celestial waters.
Interesting, yeah. That's cool. That's very exciting.
The more you look into it, the deeper you go. It is really cool.
Yeah, and the upsilon is a continuative consonant, and so it's really like nu 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 nu. And if you look at the shapes, it's kind of like it could either be the square wave of marked state, and if you want to indicate unmarked state as the opposite, you know, like this, or yeah, Till.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to that that very letter you see the how do you say, the water rippled, is actually the forerunner of the M and the N in the Latin alphabet. So historically, there's a direct line you can draw.
The dead center of the alphabet. Center of the alphabet.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, that's interesting. You sort of spared us the sexual aspects of atom, which I found interesting. So the story, how I learned it, is really about atom ending up on that Ben hill, right? And then starting to masturbate.
Yeah.
And then swallowing the semen, but not swallowing it, but breeding the first two and then spit out. Yeah, just as you told me. And I think that's really interesting how this form connects in itself already, right?
Exactly, yes. How can somebody pleasure themselves and bring themselves into being from their own seed when they don't exist? It's paradox all the way down. There are different versions of that element of the story. You sometimes get the Ogdoad creating the cosmic egg from which the phoenix, the mound, and atom emerge. Symbolically, they're all the same thing. It wasn't prudery, it's just I wanted to just focus on the symbols behind the actions rather than the actions themselves.
Just wondered how you relate the last the scarab and the kepre, which of course, as the verb being, to become, is very important. How you relate that to the Spencer Brownian idea of being, right? Because you have, what I really like about the Egyptian conception, that it's so dynamic and it actually lacks this ontological assumptions or presumptions that kind of fix moments of movement, right?
Which is why I've referred to the Cheper idea as a logos, the noun and verb together, which you get in the idea of the exclamation or the interjection, which combines the idea of a noun. You can't have an unless there's a being to express that and you can't have that unless it unfolds dynamically through time. It has elements of noun and verb. Everything I've talked about has fixed volatile to do with the mark, the move. It's what I spend a lot of time looking at in story and structure.
So I'm afraid we have time for just one more question, but this is such the erotic dimension of creation here in the Egyptian mythology and these cosmogonic symbols. It's such a terrific way into Irena's talk that we're about to have. But so one more question there.
Yeah, Philip here. I just want to comment on that thing that in your story, time is totally open. Everything is in it. It's not a marker that's closed. And that when you have two things relating, you get this openness of time rather than the closure. Maybe you want to comment.
The openness of the 5 levels of eternity. Spencer Brown talks about 3 levels of time after time has come into being. I've not managed to find any reference, and perhaps you can help me find out what exactly he meant. Was it dream time, some kind of perpetuity, and the time we set our clocks by? Was it past, present, future, which I think is too mundane? Was it beyond eternity, infinity, perpetuity, and mundane time? Was it story time, dream time, mundane time? I don't know.
I did find the Rolt. They can't hear you.
What Spencer Brown lovely, beautifully paraphrases from Rolt, I found where it is. It's in the introduction to the Divine Name, his work on
the three times.
Yeah. The discussion of it. So I linked that in the Zoom chat, and I'll send it to you later.
Thank you.
All right, with that, let us thank Leon.
Thank you.